And tonight on the news, we're talking pickles. Not just any pickles, the pickles with the probiotics. The probiotic pickles with the pucker pickles. It's one for dinner because you forgot to take something out of the freezer again. And all you got is some pickles. Could be worse dinner. I could think of worse dinners. Well, hello there, and welcome to this video. You might be wondering what all this stuff is. Well, today we're making pickles. And if you're thinking to yourself, Claire, I've already watched you make pickles before on this channel. This is a different kind of pickles. If you're new around here, I will link below the video where I show you how to make pickles with a canning method so they're shelf stable and they last for ages. It's a great video because it's a great recipe, but this is totally different than that. Today we're going to be making old-fashioned pickles or saltwater pickles or vinegar-free pickles or lacto-fermented pickles if you want to be scientific. Essentially what we're going to be doing is submerging some vegetables in a saltwater solution, and the natural bacteria that's living in these vegetables, pretty much every vegetable that grows out of the ground or any fruit or vegetable that grows from the ground has natural lactobacillus bacteria in it, and by keeping it in a saltwater solution, the saltwater keeps all the bad bacteria from being able to come in and get busy, and it lets the good bacteria that we want to be active and to have a good environment to reproduce and acidify and essentially self-preserve these vegetables. And that's what gives it the puckery part that makes it a pickle, is the lactobacillus acid that ends up becoming present. But that's not the only thing that's present. There's just a whole host of great bacteria that happens when you lacto-ferment vegetables. And these are definitely not the only ones that you could do. It pretty much works for any kind of vegetable. It just so happens that this is gonna be sort of a summertime vibe situation because that's the kind of season that I'm in. It's the kind of vegetables that I have access to. These came from the farmer's market this morning, and these are definitely typical for the things that are coming into the garden as well. Mine is just a little bit behind the farmer's market currently, but whatever you find that's fresh, you can pretty much use this recipe for, and you can totally alter the spices and the herbs and all that good stuff in here to make it suit your flavor. This is also great for people who find that vinegar-style pickles are way too puckery. It's kind of difficult to say. Generally, if you find that pickles are too sour for you, this might be your perfect method because you can taste this along the process from day 1 to day 7 to on and on and on, and find which day tastes the best to you, has the perfect amount of tart and tangy, and then you just move it to the refrigerator and you stop it from getting any further tanginess in the end product. So if you find that typical pickles are just too much for you, this might be perfect for you. And if you're somebody who finds that typical pickle products are just not crunchy enough for you, this is like the ultimate. It's just as crunchy as when you first pick it off of the plant, and that is probably my favorite part about it. Also, if we're honest, they're just good for you in the probiotic sense of things because most people, according to studies, don't have enough probiotics in their diet. And so for me, I've got to have variety in my probiotics or I'm not likely to really get very much of them in. Like I eat sauerkraut, I like kimchi, I like kombucha and kefir and yogurt and sauerkraut, all the things. And of course, fermented pickles. And if I don't have that variety, I'm not really likely to be someone who's just gonna sit down and have a cup of yogurt every morning to make sure that I get probiotics in my diet. So variety is the key for me, and it might be for you as well. And these are the perfect snacks that don't really feel like health food. So essentially, all we really have to have for this recipe is the salt water and the vegetables themselves. This salt water is a half a gallon of non-chlorinated water mixed with 5 tablespoons of kosher salt, but you could also use sea salt. Just please use a salt that is not iodized and that is not table salt. The only ingredient needs to be salt. And the reason that is because the added ingredients not only make your finished product a very cloudy situation, but they can also have ingredients that stop the fermentation or make weird stuff happen that we don't really want to happen. So go with something that's just salt. And non-chlorinated water, meaning if you're like me and you live in a city where your water comes in through the municipality, like it's treated water, most likely you have high levels of chlorine in your water, and chlorine is the enemy of fermentation. It stops all bacteria from growing, and in this case, we would like certain bacteria to be able to grow. So to solve that problem, you can basically just boil your water for a couple of minutes to ensure that the chlorine has a chance to fully evaporate out of that water, and then you are now at the stage of non-chlorinated water. Mix in your salt and you're good to go. Just make sure you fully cool it down before you go on to this step where you're putting the vegetables with it, because we don't want to cook our vegetables. You can also just use distilled water or filtered water if you would like to, but I just wanted to put that disclaimer out. Make sure it's not chlorinated water. We're gonna need some sort of vegetables. So for me, I have green beans and I have cucumbers here. I have yellow wax beans. I have dragon tongue bush beans. I have regular old green snap beans, and I have purple potted beans. And I just thought that these would be a really beautiful combination together. And the only one that I'm not really sure what is gonna happen is this purple potted bean. I know it's gonna pickle and be delicious. However, the color of it could go a couple different ways. Typically when I'm pickling a dark pigmented thing like a beet or a radish or purple onion, the dark pigments in those foods tend to kind of leach out into the solution and turn everything that's in the solution with them pink. And I love it. It's a beautifully vibrant, hot pink. But I don't think that's gonna happen with this. I think it might stay a purple color, or it might even turn green the same way it does when you cook it, because it will be an acidified solution that it's sitting into. So we'll see what happens with this. But all in all, I just thought these are really pretty, and it just so happens that all of these that I got from the farmer's market are all beans that I actually am growing right now in my garden. I just don't happen to have this many of them at this exact time. For cucumbers, I have pickling cucumbers that I have cut in half. I've also cut the both ends, the stem end and the blossom end of the cucumber off. And that's important because both ends of a cucumber have enzymes that sort of help it break down in order to become a new cucumber plant, because really, that's the only reason a fruit exists in nature, is to make another plant. But since we want to preserve this cucumber, we want to cut both of those ends off so we don't have any enzymes. You really only have to cut like a 1/4 inch off of each side. I also cut these in half because I like for my fermented pickle snacks to be a 2 or 3 bite snack, but feel free to leave them whole. You can cut them in quarters, you can cut them into spears, or even chunky slices. So do what you would like. I just would recommend nothing too small of a size. Otherwise, you're gonna get slightly more like relish or like softer end product. And also they just pickle a lot quicker, so they get sour a lot quicker the smaller they are. A pickling cucumber is essentially a cucumber that doesn't have a really thick green dark skin, and it doesn't have a really gel-like seedy center. So if you go to a grocery store, most of the long dark green cucumbers that you see are slicer cucumbers, and the small, sometimes bumpy, but almost always lighter green with the thin skin, that's gonna be your pickling cucumber. And if you wanna use slicing cucumbers, you can. Just make sure that you peel the outsides off and that you cut them in half and core all of that seedy part out of the middle. Because when I've pickled those in the past, the outside flesh, the white parts, are delicious and crispy and all that good stuff. But the inside gel parts turn into some weird like goop, and sometimes they even float to the top. It's weird. So definitely you can still use slicer cucumbers, but I prefer coring the inside of them out, all the goopy jelly seedy parts. Just cut those out and peel the outside and proceed as usual. As far as what I'm gonna be flavoring these with, you can absolutely just use these 2 parts and that's it, but I like to go a little bit further and sort of jazz up my flavors. So I have some mustard seeds here. These add sort of the traditional pickle flavors, and they add a little bit of warmth, not quite spice level heat, but just a little bit of warmth and some bright citrusy notes that are in this mustard seed. You can obviously leave that out though. I'm adding some crushed garlic cloves. These have just been smashed, not like minced or anything. I'm gonna add a couple of these to each container. I also have some fresh bay leaves. So you can also use dried if you have them. Bay leaves do a couple of different things. Number one, I love the smell and the flavor that they impart into the overall finished product. But also bay leaves naturally have something called tannins, which is also in grape leaves and in wine. Basically, and oak leaves as well. If you have an oak tree, you can use oak leaves. Essentially, they just keep things crispy and fresh. So I like to add them, but they're definitely not necessary. Things will still stay crunchy, but it's habit. I like it. And lastly, I have dill weed that's dried. I am growing dill outside, but I don't have enough for this volume of a situation, so dried dill weed will work perfectly fine. You can also use dill seed, but just know that dill seed is a little bit more of a savory type deep flavor, whereas dill weed is a lot lighter and more fragrant of a flavor. So this is so simple. I don't think you're even gonna believe how quickly this comes together. So we're gonna do the green beans first, and we're gonna do them in this tall 1.5 pint size jar. It's the strangest size jar ever, but it works perfectly for this because the green beans are long and skinny, and so is the jar. So I'm gonna throw a couple of cloves of garlic. I'm gonna put some of my mustard seeds in the bottom. If you ever wonder why I tend to build my pickles from the seasonings up, is because that way they stay at the bottom and stay submerged, and the vegetables help hold them down so I don't have a bunch of spices floating around on the top. So I have my garlic, I have my mustard seeds. I'm gonna put in 1 bay leaf, and I'm gonna put in a pretty good sprinkling of dill weed. And then, oh, it smells so good. Then I'm just going to pack in my green beans. And so the easiest way to do that is to sort of get them in a handful or a clump, and then sort of lean your jar sideways and cram them in. It's easiest to do this sideways because that way gravity is helping you sort of pack everything in tightly, and you want it to be a fairly tight situation. That way you don't have to weigh things down. And if you do have to weigh things down, that's not the end of the world. But generally, just like any other kind of pickling, you want everything to stay submerged, and the easiest way to do that is to pack them in fairly tightly. And I find that the easiest way to do that is to go sideways with it. I was trying to do this in like a cutesy little rainbow lineup, but they're not cooperating, and I just don't care enough to really fix it. So they're gonna go in the order that they feel like going in. All right, let's see. We're gonna have to move these over, cram these in. Lost a green bean. All right. And last one in over here. Okay, so we have all of our green beans in here, and I'm gonna just try to scooch some of them down to make sure everything stays low. All right, so we have our seasonings in the bottom, we have our green beans in, and now, get this, we're just going to cover it in our saltwater solution. And you do want to absolutely leave some space in the top of your container, preferably about 1 inch. It looks like I have slightly less than that, but I may pour some out. But anyway, you want to leave some headspace in your jar because in the process of fermentation, things are gonna bubble. There's natural gases that are released, and if you don't leave some space, things will leak out of the side of the jar. So leave a little bit of space. I'm gonna set that to the side, and we're gonna work on our cucumbers. I'm gonna do the cucumbers in this big Tupperware container that I have, basically because these cucumbers were a little chunky and I wouldn't have been able to fit very many in even a quart-sized jar. So a plastic container works just as well as a glass one. You can also use ceramic. Just don't use anything metal because it's considered reactive when it comes to the fermentation process. So, you know, glass, plastic, ceramic, you're good to go. I just broke my own rule about adding in my seasonings at the bottom, so I'm just gonna shake this all to the side, and I'm gonna go ahead and proceed as normal, just trying to get it down into that corner. And throw in my garlic. This one's gonna be particularly garlicky. Throw in my bay leaf, and then I'm going to put in my dill weed. Let me take the lid off of that because I ain't got time for that shaker. All right, shake it down in there. Oh, it just smells so good. I feel like dill is the smell of summer for me, especially when you mix it with garlic and cucumbers. So now I'm gonna cover all that stuff back up. And then I'm gonna cover it with my saltwater brine. And the great thing about cucumbers is they take on this brine so well, but if you like a New York style half sour pickle, you can just stop this process at about day 3 and you get like the most delicious cucumber pickle hybrid. Like, it still tastes so much like fresh cucumber and it's wonderful. So now we have our things submerged and we're gonna talk about covering. So for this, I'm gonna be using this handy dandy lid that is from Nourished Essentials. I think it's called the Easy Fermenter lid. Essentially, it comes with this airlock in the middle, so it lets out all those gases I was talking about, so you don't end up with any leaking or anything like that, and you don't have to come by and unscrew the lid and re-screw the lid. All you gotta do is slap this baby on. It comes with a lovely little date slider, so you can keep track of when you started this ferment, and that helps you know how far along you are to know if you're getting close to being done. So for this, all you have to do is screw it on, and that's it. For this, we have some of our cucumbers that are wanting to float. Let me see if I add more liquid, if they'll still be floating. Let's see. Yes, they still want to float. So I'm gonna show you my little hack on how to keep them submerged. If they were in a jar, I could have crammed them a little bit further, like a little bit harder in to make sure they didn't float. But I'm gonna show you my hack on how I'm gonna keep them submerged, because that's really important so that they don't get exposed to any bad bacteria in the air. Give me just a second, I'll be right back. Say hello to my little friend, the Ziploc bag. So we're gonna put this Ziploc bag right on top of our situation here, and I'm gonna pour, you guessed it, some more brine into it. And as you can see, the cucumbers are already starting to sink under the weight of this bag. So I'm gonna pour just a little bit more in there just so I have full coverage. I'm gonna zip it most of the way, get the air out of it. And then I'm just gonna smush it down in there. So that way I can ensure I actually have this one last cucumber that doesn't want to behave. There we go. All right, now all of my cucumbers are submerged and I can go about sealing it or semi-sealing it as I was going to if I didn't have any floating issues. So all I'm gonna do is put on the lid for this Tupperware and I'm gonna leave this corner not attached. I wanna make sure it's loose. And the same thing is gonna be the case if you're using a mason jar, like a regular mason jar lid. You can definitely just use a regular lid on your jar. Make sure you leave it fingertip tight though, like and just barely closed, because like I was talking about with the gases, you're gonna have to come by and open it and reclose it pretty much every day as the fermentation starts to happen if you use a regular lid or if you keep it very sealed. With this way, I don't have to worry about doing that because I've left it partially open. So if you just set your mason jar lid on top like this, that's all you have to do. If you want to be a little bit more secure with it, like if you're worried somebody might like bump a wall or something and knock it over, you can definitely seal it a little bit more than that. Just make sure that if you are doing that method, you come by every couple of days and sort of unscrew the lid and rescrew it. It's called burping it. It lets out all the carbon dioxide bubbles so that you don't end up with leakage. I have never had a ferment explode like sometimes you'll see in, I think it's just people trying to make fermentation sound scary. You'll be just fine with either of these methods, whether it's an actual fermentation lid, if it's a regular mason jar lid that you just loosely put on top. You can also use cheesecloth over the top of it with a rubber band, or 2 coffee filters put together over the top with a rubber band. You can just use like a Tupperware with a lid that's not fully on, and that's all you have to do. Now what you'll do is take these and you're gonna put them in some location that's preferably not above 75 degrees. So in my house in the summertime, my kitchen, because I cook so much, does not fall into that category. So I will actually put these into a closet in my living room where I can pull the door shut, it stays cool, and it stays a fairly level-ish temperature. If things are too hot around these ferments, they will just ferment a lot quicker. So you'll have to be tasting them a lot sooner so that you make sure you don't go too far and things get, too sour or, you know, mushy or anything like that. And you also don't want things to be too cold, which is why we're not doing this in the fridge, because they won't really ferment very quickly at all. It'll take like a month or more to ferment in the fridge because it's just too cold for that lactobacillus bacteria to really take off. So just put this in some area out of the way. Set a reminder on your phone for 4 days from now where you can go reach in with a clean finger and taste your beans or your cucumbers and figure out if you are at the level of tart and tangy and puckery. If you are, throw it into your fridge, and these last like forever practically. You don't really have to worry about these going bad. And then if you taste them and you don't think they have enough like pickle flavor for you, just let them go another 2 days and then taste them again. Basically, after you get to 7 days of fermenting, you want to be tasting them about every day because things start to happen a little bit faster after that point. So once you get to that point, you're done. I mean, it's so quick. This whole thing takes no time at all to do. And most of the time involved is hands off because you're just letting it sit and ferment. And the payoff is these delicious, super healthy for you, and just wonderful ways to use the stuff that's overflowing, especially if you have a garden. I absolutely love these. They're like one of my favorite things ever, and I'm gonna have to get back into the mentality this summer of every time I get down to half of eating this, I'm gonna have to start making another one so I don't run out and have to go anytime between having these lovely things in my fridge because I absolutely love to snack on them. They're perfect for a hot day. Or a Bloody Mary, or a side for your hamburger, or they're just so good. So that is it. That is as simple as it gets, in my opinion, as far as preserving something by pickling. I hope that you guys enjoy this recipe, and if you try it out, please let me know in the comments below. Or if you have any questions or issues that come up, I am happy to answer them. Just leave me a comment, or even if none of those things apply and you're just happy to hang out on the video, I'm happy to hang out with you too. So just, you know, leave me a comment and say, what's up? Because I love to chat with you guys, and I love this little community that we have here on this channel. And as always, I hope that you are having a wonderful day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!